When the thunderous roar of the morning of April 18, 1906 shattered the stone domes of Stanford University, David Starr Jordan's lifetime empire of fish specimens was reduced to a hopeless ruin in seconds. It was a natural disaster violent enough to alter the geomorphology of the North American continent, a massive tremor exceeding magnitude 8.0 erupting at 5:12 a.m. before dawn. In Palo Alto, south of San Francisco, California, the massive San Andreas Fault ruptured deep underground, shaking the entire valley with terrifying violence. Grand granite arches on the Stanford campus collapsed with a roar, stone academic buildings and libraries split with immense fissures, and tens of thousands of rare books and scientific instruments were crushed in the upheaval. Inside the Natural History Museum built under Jordan's lead, a tragic catastrophe reserved for global science was unfolding. Tens of thousands of custom glass specimen jars fell in batches from towering oak cabinets, shattering to pieces on the hard granite floor. High-concentration ethanol and pungent formaldehyde rapidly pooled into cascading rivers, spreading wildly through thick smoke and dust, filling the building with suffocating toxic fumes and a grim foreboding of decaying fish. This university, founded by railroad tycoon Leland Stanford and his wife Jane Stanford in memory of their deceased son, was the grandest stage for Jordan to showcase his scientific ambition. In 1884, the Stanfords lost their only child, Leland Stanford Jr., in Florence, Italy. In deep and solemn grief, the wealthy couple decided to dedicate their vast fortune to education, declaring to the world, "The children of California shall be our children." To build an institution capable of rivaling Harvard and Yale, Stanford hired 30-something ichthyologist David Starr Jordan as the founding president. As the youngest university president in America, Jordan brought top scholars to campus and consolidated his 30 years of rare specimens collected from North America, South America, Hawaii, Japan, and Samoa. During the grand 1901 expedition to the Hawaiian Islands, Jordan and his assistant Barton Everman captured hundreds of colorful coral reef fish. To record their transient hues before fading in preservative alcohol, he hired painter Charles Bradley Hudson to render delicate watercolor portraits of each fish before sealing them in 95% pure grain alcohol jars. Throughout those long decades, Jordan led his expedition teams across frozen streams, bug-infested swamps, and oceanic waves, recording uncatalogued aquatic life. In an era of crude transportation, searching for new fish species was grueling, dangerous physical labor. Jordan waded in freezing streams for days, dragged crates of heavy alcohol jars through swamps, and braved oceanic storms on small fishing boats. After every trip, they examined fin rays, scale counts, and bone structures under microscopes, recording precise data into archives before sealing specimens in jars. It was a temple of natural order built from countless glass jars. Hundreds of tall oak cabinets stood in rows inside the multi-meter-high exhibit hall, holding tens of thousands of preserved skeletal structures, anatomical organs, rare holotypes, and formal Latin binomial labels written in Indian ink. The air filled with cedarwood, polished beeswax, and underlying ethanol fumes. Influenced by his mentor Louis Agassiz's motto on Penikese Island, "Study nature, not books," Jordan believed a divine taxonomy governed the universe, and the scientist's duty was revealing this hidden order. Every numbered glass jar bearing a Latin name was a fortress of reason rescued from chaotic entropy. Pure alcohol sealed away decay, preserving fragile life forms against the ravages of time. Now, nature's violent power shattered this temple in seconds. When the violent tremors finally subsided, Jordan stepped over rubble and broken glass into the museum, witnessing a hellish scene. Decades of scientific achievement turned into a mire of broken glass, toxic liquid, and thousands of dead fish. Decades of labor in freezing streams and storm oceans seemed destroyed in an instant. The far more fatal tragedy was not the broken glass, but the loss of identity. In cladistics and taxonomy, a specimen without a name, locality, collector, or data is merely a piece of worthless rotting flesh. Holotypes representing the original standard definition of species lost their corresponding parchment labels as alcohol washed them away and glass shards ripped them off, floating in toxic puddles. Tropical reef fish from Hawaii, endangered trout from the Colorado River, and rare deep-sea specimens from the Pacific all lost their names, devolving into an unrecognizable mass of organic matter. This was nature's cruelest mockery of Jordan's faith, a total triumph of entropy over human reason. Facing a ruin that would break the strongest scholar, Jordan showed not a single second of despair or hesitation. People around him wept, colleagues went mad grieving over lost academic heritage, and students collapsed on the ground. But 55-year-old Jordan stood calmly in the toxic ruins, his eyes flashing with near-manic determination. Standing over 6 feet tall with a massive frame, he looked like an immovable steel tower. In his worldview, grief and compromise meant surrendering to chaos. If glass jars could no longer protect order, and flowing alcohol washed away identity, he had to invent a method more ruthless than nature and more durable than earthquakes to defend human taxonomy. Jordan knelt down, retrieved a tin of ordinary steel sewing needles from the rubble, and pulled out a spool of heavy linen thread and wire. In the smoky, shaking ruins with falling debris, he performed an act that shocked all onlookers. He unhesitatingly squatted in the puddle of glass and toxic formaldehyde, grabbing drying fish specimens with his bare hands. Relying on astonishing memory and anatomical intuition, he identified fish species within seconds. Whether hard rockfish, swift rainbow trout, or deep-sea chimeras, he named them precisely. The moment he confirmed the name, he pierced the hard parchment Latin label with his steel needle, pushing it straight through the specimen's gills, lips, or thick muscle, sewing the label firmly into the fish flesh. This was a direct battle between human willpower and natural destruction. Pungent formaldehyde fumes burned his eyes and skin, frequent aftershocks shook the earth with heavy rumbles, and structural collapses threatened his life, but Jordan's fingers never trembled. Stitch by stitch, needle by needle, he sewed the names torn away by the earthquake back into the living flesh itself. Glass jars could shatter and alcohol could evaporate, but as long as the flesh remained, the label would never separate. To prevent these restitched fish from drying and rotting, he ordered assistants to wrap them in damp burlap soaked in diluted formaldehyde, packing them neatly into heavy wooden shipping crates reinforced with iron bands. Jordan sewed a new fortress of order upon the ruins with sewing needles. Under his scarred, bloody hands, thousands of dead fish bearing tags through their muscles regained their scientific identity. He sewed the names straight into the fish skin, conquering total destruction with absolute willpower. To rescue more specimens in the dangerous aftershock environment, Jordan worked several days without sleep. His clothes soaked in toxic alcohol and formaldehyde, his hands cut by glass, he functioned like an untiring precision machine. When colleagues and assistant Everman urged him to rest, he coldly refused, stating, "We are not saving dead fish, we are saving the flame of human reason." In his voice was no human fatigue or fear. Inspired by his manic drive, the paralyzed team regrouped, copying his technique to clean, classify, and sew labels onto specimens. With steel willpower, Jordan rescued tens of thousands of scientific treasures and rebuilt the team's spirit upon despair. When author Lulu Miller read through these historical archives, she was hit by an indescribable wave of awe. Before writing this book, Lulu was in her darkest life phase. Her 7-year relationship collapsed, her apartment burned down, and her career stalled. Worse, her cold biochemist father repeatedly drilled a pessimistic worldview into her: the universe is full of random chaos, humans are accidental organic molecules, and life has no intrinsic meaning. In her father's words, nature was a ruthless entropy monster swallowing all achievement. In deep depression and self-doubt, Lulu desperately needed a role model, someone who could stand firm when the world collapsed and rebuild life single-handedly. Jordan sewing up the ruins with needles became her ultimate pillar against entropy and despair. While marveling at Jordan's astonishing resilience, perceptive Lulu began investigating deeper into Jordan's life history. She wanted to know what psychological structure enabled a man to maintain such cold calm before massive disaster. Did this terrifying power stem from pure love for science or a deeper psychological defense mechanism? As her investigation deepened, family tragedies hidden in historical dust emerged. On his path to scientific peaks, fate struck him repeatedly. In his youth, his beloved older brother Rufus died of typhoid during the Civil War. Rufus was his mentor in botany and astronomy, building plant specimen boxes and star maps together on the prairie. 24-year-old Rufus's death in Army camp gave young Jordan his first taste of life's fragility. Standing by Rufus's coffin, young Jordan vowed to complete his brother's unfinished nature exploration. In his early career years, his first wife Susan Bowen, a brilliant botanist who loved him deeply, died suddenly of acute illness during an 1885 expedition. Soon after, their young daughter passed away. For any ordinary person, losing loved ones repeatedly would cause mental breakdown. Facing these massive traumas, Jordan displayed rare and chilling emotional compartmentalization. After his wife's funeral, Jordan shed no tears and wrote no sorrowful words in his diary, leading a fish expedition down the Mississippi River the very next morning. In Jordan's autobiography and personal letters, one finds almost no deep mourning for lost family. Facing the death of his wife and child, he never paused research or showed weakness. He rapidly compartmentalized and sealed away sorrow, throwing himself into fish taxonomy and university management with doubled mania. To him, indulging in grief was a useless waste of life, and emotional fluctuation was an irrational weed in the mind. In essays like The Philosophy of Despair, he declared that to achieve greatness, one must trample sorrow underfoot, never look back, and never let regret or sympathy weaken action. He invented a psychological mechanism. Whenever encountering unbearable trauma, he filled every morning and night with heavier work and grander plans. This total suppression of emotion and worship of pragmatic willpower reached its peak in the San Francisco earthquake. In Jordan's eyes, natural destruction was merely a larger test of human willpower. Sewing labels into fish flesh was the physical extension of his mental defense mechanism. He refused to admit loss of control or vulnerability, refusing to concede that nature had the power to destroy his achievements. By sewing tags into flesh, he not only conquered the earthquake but completed a mental self-deification. He believed that if his determination was firm enough, no force could shake the order he established. As Lulu Miller studied these subtle details, her admiration turned into a growing chill. In her eyes, David Starr Jordan evolved into a complex contradiction, both a hero who conquered natural disaster and a nightmare source of cold arrogance. She discovered his strength stemmed not from broad empathy, but narrow self-inflation. To maintain inner order, he sealed his emotional channels, showing natural coldness to people around him. During Stanford's Reconstruction, Jordan ruled with an iron fist, ousting economics professor Edward Ross for opposing Stanford family interests. When Jane Stanford died of strychnine poisoning in Hawaii in 1905, Jordan rushed to the scene, hired private doctors to rewrite the autopsy report as heart failure, and suppressed local police investigations to protect Stanford's reputation and his absolute authority. This extreme obsession with absolute order led Jordan to a dangerous conviction: the world must operate according to his system, and he was the righteous arbiter of evolution. In his 1899 address Imperial Democracy, Jordan argued that war's greatest tragedy was not financial loss, but destroying a nation's fittest young men while allowing inferior stock to multiply. He expanded taxonomy from fish to human society, founding the Eugenics Committee of the American Breeders' Association to purge genetic weeds through forced sterilization. Would this obsessive drive for absolute order lead to redemption, or transform him into a cold-hearted arbiter of human destiny?